It was powerful 20 years ago. It actually is one of those records that strangely sounds newer today than it even did kind of 20 years ago to me. What's even more frustrating is that the person who made it looks younger today than he did. It's a crazy thing, but that's life, man. That's what experience does for you when you come out the other side of it and you know yourself, you understand yourself, you like yourself. All of a sudden, the years evaporate, and here you are 20 years on from Confessions. It's good to see you, bro.
20 years. What up, Zane, man? Listen, 20 years, man.
Crazy.
I mean, I think I've, on this one album, been here long enough to consider it a past, present, future kind of experience,
Yeah,
you know? Being able to benefit from the past, in the present moment, being able to celebrate it, you know? And then also to allowing, you know, the greatness of what these songs represent to still have a relevance in this time.
It's an album that sits at number 95 in Apple Music's first ever 100 best albums of all time. Out of every album ever created, people who voted for this, of which there were a lot, from artists to people who write about music to people who help put it together on playlists, anyone who truly loves music and is passionate in the conversation puts Confessions in the 100 best albums of all time. And rightfully so.
Rightfully so, man. It's an incredible, you know, collaborative effort. So many amazing producers. And that time, me and L.A. Reid, Mark Pitts working together on this amazing album. Jermaine Dupri, Jimmy Terry Lewis, Dre and Vidal.
It's like the Avengers of that era of music. It's unreal.
Yeah, man. So many incredible pieces of art. Brian Michael Cox and JD together, just, you know, we hit a stride on 8701, but when we got to Confessions, it was like something that, I mean, we don't have of any footage of us making the album because we just didn't focus on it in that way. And don't get me wrong, I think we were early in kind of pioneering the idea of like having cameras around, but it was such an analog thing to do in that time to set up a camera in the room or either have, you know, an extended member sitting in the room who was just cataloging or capturing or documenting. It's
not just that, man.
This
you think
moment.
About the themes of this record, right? The idea of this sort of unbridled, uninterrupted honesty.
Yeah.
This album's called Confessions for a reason.
Yeah.
Having cameras in the room while you're creating Confessions could have betrayed the original idea of it.
You're right. This is the truth. But I mean, now it's just folklore. It's just legend. You know what I mean? It's like,
even better.
What happened? Well, we got in the room and we had God talk. You know what I'm saying? We were going
Not
through
good enough, Usher. I brought you here today to go a little deeper than that. That's been the standard line since it came out. We're going to go a little deeper than that.
All right. I'll give you some insight. Everybody that happened to be a part of this album that was intimate in the moment, right? It was Mark Pitt. And I'm probably putting a lot of people on blast right now. You got Mark, you got JD, myself. You know, it was an incredible effort and an idea, but we all had dealt with this very, very specific situation where we were all in relationships with a woman, and Daryl Jones actually was also too was in the room, but we were all talking about this situation, the fact that, you know, we're kind of in a situation where you with somebody and you gotta let your woman know, and then it just it went to another level. Like we literally sitting in there talking about our shit. Like, yo, I'm going through this right now, and I'm trying to figure out how to deal with this. I'm like, I'm gonna carry it. Meanwhile, I know all the time, I'm living wrong.
Yeah.
I'm living wrong. The reality is, you know, you go through it sometime to get to it. Great songs came of it.
Great songs, but I also think that, you know, an important moment in your career and also in the ability for superstars to acknowledge that heavy is the crown.
Yeah.
That when you're having the kind of success you're having, regardless of what everyone thinks your life is,
that's right,
that heavy is the crown.
I mean, by the way, I think we were trying to find more than just making great songs. We were trying to remind people of how incredible of a genre R&B was and what it represented. As hip-hop was making its transition and becoming more relevant, pop music was continuing to drift. Rock and roll was still what it was, very relevant in that time. You know, alternative music and alternative genres were coming up and becoming more relevant. We needed to, you know, really shock the world. And it was only the truth of that moment. You know, if you don't go through anything that that you're not bearing within the process of making an album, you're not really giving it the value.
You know, this is one of those albums that when it came out, people forget. Not those who heard it who were there, but anyone who's subsequently discovered it. This was a viral album. When this came out, it became all anyone could talk about. primarily because of the quality of the music and the fact that it felt like a blockbuster film when you listened to it. It felt conceptual and deep and heavy and beautifully produced.
Yeah.
But also because it was you that was carrying everyone's confessions, really. And it became, whether you meant to or not, and that's going to be my question, it became ultimately quite an important marketing exercise where it was like, do we really say that this has been a collective conversation that just adds up to one sort of experience that this group of men have had? Or is it Usher's confessions? And no one really knew for a while.
Well, the collective of all of it, it was storytelling. It was intended to arouse and pique interest so that people would want to know more about this artist. Up until that moment, I'd not really spoken about my personal relationships.
Right.
And even though I was singing songs, there was a question of whether these songs were relevant to my actual experience. Before then, I didn't really have a major, relationship that was noted and people would pay attention to and probably point songs to.
And this is the album that people, correct me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong, aligned to your relationship with Chili from TLC.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is correct.
And so when this album comes out and everyone starts to make that connection, right, you have every opportunity at that moment to loudly clear this up. But it didn't seem to happen that way. It felt like, you know what, to your point, let's let this sit in the ambiguous space just for a minute because people are excited about this. And I wonder how conscious of that you were at the time, or how, looking back on it now, maybe it was just happening too fast for you to put it out.
No, it was actually happening so fast that we could not catch up to it or the reactions that she or I would have. It actually was an interview in Atlanta that she had where people asked her the question of rather infidelity was the reason why we broke up. And, she didn't answer it in the way that they would have thought that she would have. She she alluded to, so people instantly made the connection that confessions was what I was talking about. It wasn't in the actual sense. There was some, there was an unfortunate end to the relationship, but we resolved it, dissolved it, and moved on. But it definitely became a grand conversation of rather there was a baby out there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. There's a timestamp on this album. And it's funny looking back on it now, the success of it in many respects is owed to all of it. The quality, the triumph, what you created, but also the craziness of it. And this is sort of
the vulnerability of it.
Yeah.
For men.
Yeah.
Because men don't necessarily always have an outlet. We're not really comfortable speaking to a therapist in that way. And if we've gotten to the place where we can be honest, where do? We let it out in a barbershop, bruh. You know what I'm saying? We let it out in private quarters, and there were not really a lot of spaces and things like moments where we could, kind of make that connection in this way. Hell yeah, there were cultural albums and things that were relevant to us that we would all share in saying, yeah, but there was some really, really unfortunate and dark truths that would unfold in this album.
Is accountability across this album as well.
It was.
Which is really interesting at a time, I think, when people look to superstars to live their life freely.
Yeah.
And ultimately follow a moral compass, but do so in a sense of like, hey, success comes at a price. This is not the life that anyone would really understand. There's a lot of sort of these areas where it's just like, just keep moving. And it's like, this is a moment where you stopped and you were like, hang on, there's nothing wrong with accountability. There's nothing wrong with acknowledgement.
Well, first of all, you're looked at as though you are a symbol of perfection, being an artist. You can't go through the same things that we go through. No, it was a humanizing experience that made you say, oh, you go through the same things that I go through and experience the same feelings and vulnerability that I do. It was just the opportunity to be honest about it. And it was probably the most honest I had been. And then being able to look at the kind of unveiling of more of what we were talking about in those spaces. Yeah, I cheated. You know what I'm saying? That was what all bad was about. The fact that I was living foul out here in Los Angeles, doing what I was doing. And, I wrote about it. We wrote about it. And then we decided to go further because there's a next part to it.
It is a remarkable document in that regard. Yeah. And I think it's also you're a young man at that moment in time. You
that doesn't justify it though. But yeah,
no, not in relation to the behavior, but in relation to the courage to actually start to communicate about that.
Yeah,
right. That comes later in life, right? Mm-hmm. I don't want to draw any comparisons to other albums, but we have some very special albums that acknowledge flaws and failings in the human experience, but they tend to happen 10, 15 years on from where you are at.
The desire and the clearing of conscience, right? Is what music offers us. Even if it's a positive thing that you choose to write down, it's something that I thought about, something I need to get out, right? So within this album, because Lauryn Hill's Miseducation could be one. I listened to that album a lot and thought about the honesty that was in it, the vulnerability that was in that album, and being able to now have my shot at it because people know this much about me. They know I'm an entertainer. They know that I want to please them with entertainment, but they don't know about me. They don't know.
It's not your true identity, that.
Right. And me and JD, we spent enough time together to lock into a narrative, and we were consistent, and everything around it represented that. We created the foundation. We didn't come up with the name Confessions actually to the end. It started off as we just wanted to have real talk as men. I went out to Los Angeles, worked with these two young, incredible talents, the Avila brothers, with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who introduced me to them. Mark Byers brought me to Philly, by way of, working with Dre and Vidal. We created incredible records that would then kind of give the nuance of other pieces of the story. Working with Pooh Bear and also to Ryan Toby, we wrote they wrote some really incredible records that I felt like I could carry. And then I had my part in helping to articulate it vocally. But man, all of that collaborative effort, and then my personal relationship with Robin Thicke, because I'd wanted to work with him for so long, this gave me that opportunity to be able to try some new things, because I felt like his R&B was just different. His music sensibility, the quality that came from who he was.
Melodically fierce human being.
Yeah.
His melodies are incredible. Incredible.
Yeah.
I feel like this was an album that really put you on the world stage, and you've been there ever since. Do you recognize that?
I do. I think that it was the one that allowed my name to be known around the world. It was an album that would, go on to be recognized for its certification in terms of how many albums it had sold, and to this date, it actually is the only one, and no one's beat that record. By way of the fact that we just don't necessarily consume music in the way that we used to as a tangible asset or piece of IP, right?
But there are artists that continue to be inspired by this album that I think actually carry the template of concept forward. I think Summer Walker did that very much on her album.
Yeah.
And obviously you played a role in that. So there's a nod there. There's an honest, genuine, and transparent nod to what you do as an artist and as a writer, and her version of that through her filter, her life. Did you recognize that? Is that something that drew you into the project of, like, Summer comes at this from a very transparent, honest point of view? She has her take to it.
Maybe it's just something about Atlanta artists that, we have this ability to kind of band together even if we don't know each other. We're inspiring each other and inspired by each other. But yeah, I'm very happy that it could be of inspiration. And then I could go on to have an incredible relationship, friendship with Summer, and encourage and support her. But man, 20 years, it's like, I guess you don't really think of any of these things when you're just passion based. I was in a very, it was a defining moment. I realized what I was going after. I need the world to understand who I am, not just what I do.
Yeah.
And what I am talking about is relevant enough for you to live through these experiences, or either live with me through these experiences.